The auction house in Sweetwater Creek buzzed with excitement and cruel murmurs as the crowd parted to make way for the newest item to be sold. Standing nearly 6.5 feet tall, the Native American woman towered over every man in the room. Her long black hair cascaded down her back, and despite the torn dress they had forced upon her, she maintained a dignified posture that commanded attention. The auctioneer, a short man with yellowing teeth and a whiskey-stained vest, tugged at the chains binding her wrists as he led her onto the wooden platform. Her face remained stoic, though her dark eyes burned with a quiet defiance that made several men in the front row shift uncomfortably. "Next up, gentlemen, we have ourselves a real curiosity," the auctioneer announced, his voice carrying through the tobacco-hazed room. "A giant squaw captured near the Blackfoot territory, strong as 2 men, they say, might be useful for heavy labor around your properties." The crowd erupted in laughter as someone shouted, "She ain't a woman, she's a monster." Another voice called out, "Better check if she's hiding a warrior under them skirts." The auctioneer played to the crowd, circling her like a vulture. Despite her unusual stature, she's young and healthy. Could be worth something to the right buyer. Who'll start the bidding at $10? The room fell silent as the men exchanged glances. Some snickering, others simply staring at the woman with a mixture of fear and morbid fascination. No one raised a hand. The auctioneer's smile faltered as he lowered the opening bid to $5, then $3. The native woman stared straight ahead, her expression unchanging, though something in her eyes suggested she understood every word being said. Outside, thunder rolled across the distant mountains, and through the grimy windows dark clouds gathered on the horizon, mirroring the storm of humiliation being visited upon her. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath her bare feet as she shifted her weight slightly, the only indication of her discomfort. "Come now, gentlemen," the auctioneer said, growing desperate. "Surely someone can find use for a strong back even if it comes in an unusual package." The mockery continued until the saloon doors swung open with such force that they slammed against the walls. A cold gust of wind swept through the room, causing the oil lamps to flicker. Every head turned as a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped inside, water dripping from his long canvas duster. His face was partially hidden by the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat, but the silver star pinned to his chest gleamed in the lamplight. The room immediately quieted, and even the auctioneer's practiced smile wavered. Sheriff Thomas Blackwood moved through the crowd with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to respect, his spurs jingling with each deliberate step. His weathered face, framed by a salt-and-pepper beard, betrayed no emotion as he surveyed the scene before him. At 45, Blackwood had earned his reputation through 15 years of keeping order in a town that resisted it at every turn. "What's going on here, Jenkins?" he asked the auctioneer, his voice low and graveled by years of hard living. The smaller man stammered, explaining it was just a routine auction of captured natives, perfectly legal according to territorial law. Blackwood's steel-grey eyes moved from the auctioneer to the woman, lingering on her bound wrists and the silent dignity with which she bore her circumstances. Before the sheriff could respond, the saloon doors opened again. This time the man who entered caused an even greater stir. Gabriel Montgomery, owner of the Double M Ranch and the wealthiest man in 3 counties, removed his gloves with deliberate slowness as he surveyed the room. At 50, Montgomery's once dark hair had turned silver at the temples, but his imposing frame and piercing blue eyes had lost none of their power. His ranch sprawled over 20,000 acres of prime grazing land, and he employed more men than any other business in the territory. Unlike many who had found fortune in the West, Montgomery had the bearing of old money, his clothes finely tailored despite their frontier practicality. The murmuring crowd parted before him like water. "Sheriff?" Montgomery nodded to Blackwood before turning his attention to the platform. His gaze settled on the native woman, but where others had looked with mockery or disgust, Montgomery's expression revealed nothing but careful assessment. "What's your name?" he asked her directly, ignoring the auctioneer completely. The room fell silent, many surprised that he would address her as a person rather than property. The woman remained silent for a long moment, her dark eyes evaluating Montgomery with the same intensity he studied her. Finally, in a voice deeper than most women's but clear and precise, she answered, "I am called Tallfeather." Her English was perfect, surprising many in the audience who had assumed her to be unable to understand their language. The auctioneer, sensing an opportunity, quickly interjected, "Mr. Montgomery, sir, are you interested in making a bid?" "She's strong," could be useful around your ranch. A cruel smile spread across his face as he added, though I can't imagine what for, unless you need someone to scare off wolves. Several men laughed, but their amusement died quickly when Montgomery turned his cold gaze upon them. Without acknowledging the auctioneer's comment, Montgomery asked the woman another question. The Blackfoot are far from here. How did you come to be in this place? Tallfeather's eyes narrowed slightly, the only indication of her surprise at his knowledge of her tribe. I was traveling to find my mother's people, she replied. These men attacked our camp while the warriors were hunting. They killed the elders and took the women. Montgomery removed a leather pouch from his coat and tossed it to the auctioneer. The heavy clink of gold coins silenced the room. That should cover her price and then some, he said, his tone making it clear he would brook no argument. The auctioneer hurriedly counted the money, his eyes widening at the amount. But, sir, he protested weakly, the bidding hasn't even properly started. Montgomery's response was cold. It's finished now. Sheriff Blackwood watched the exchange with interest, his hand resting casually on his holstered Colt. The tension in the room was palpable as Montgomery stepped onto the platform and produced a key from his pocket, unlocking the chains that bound Tallfeather's wrists. As the shackles fell away, Tallfeather rubbed her wrists, her expression still guarded, but her eyes reflecting cautious curiosity. Standing side by side, she was indeed taller than Montgomery by several inches, an unusual sight that caused renewed murmuring among the crowd. Montgomery turned to address the room, his voice carrying the authority of a man used to being obeyed. This woman is now under my protection. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally. The challenge hung in the air, met only with silence. Montgomery gestured toward the door, and Tallfeather, after a moment's hesitation, moved with surprising grace for someone of her stature toward the exit. Sheriff Blackwood followed them outside, where rain had begun to fall in heavy sheets. Montgomery's carriage waited, a fine vehicle with the double M brand emblazoned on the side. What are you playing at, Gabriel? Blackwood asked, as Montgomery helped Tallfeather into the carriage, offering her his coat to shield against the rain. Montgomery turned to his old friend, his expression softening slightly. Not playing at anything, Thomas, just couldn't stomach what was happening in there. The sheriff studied him for a long moment. Be careful. People around here don't take kindly to unusual arrangements. Montgomery smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. When have I ever cared what people think? With a tip of his hat, he climbed into the carriage beside Tallfeather and signaled his driver to depart. The journey to the Double M Ranch took place in silence, the rhythmic sound of hooves and the patter of rain on the carriage roof the only accompaniment to their thoughts. Tallfeather watched the landscape through the window, memorizing every turn of the road, every landmark they passed. Though she gave no outward sign, her mind calculated distances, evaluated escape routes should they become necessary. Montgomery seemed content to let her be, respecting the boundaries between them. As they crested a hill, the ranch came into view, a sprawling main house built of timber and stone, surrounded by outbuildings, corrals and pastures that stretched as far as the eye could see. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth against the autumn chill. The carriage pulled up to the main house, where a grey-haired woman in an apron waited under the covered porch. Mrs. Holbrook, the housekeeper who had managed Montgomery's domestic affairs since his wife's death 10 years earlier, couldn't hide her shock at the sight of Tallfeather emerging from the carriage. "Mr. Montgomery," she exclaimed, her eyes wide. "What in heaven's name—" Montgomery cut her off with a gentle but firm tone. "Mrs. Holbrook, this is Tallfeather. She'll be staying with us. Please prepare the guest room and find some suitable clothes." The housekeeper hesitated only briefly before her professional demeanor reasserted itself. "So, of course, sir, though I'm not sure we have anything that will fit." Her eyes traveled up Tallfeather's impressive height. "Then we'll make something," Montgomery replied, ushering Tallfeather into the warmth of the house. Inside, the ranch house revealed an unexpected elegance. Polished wooden floors covered with fine rugs, walls adorned with paintings alongside mounted antlers and rifles. A massive stone fireplace dominated the main room, where a fire crackled welcomingly. Tallfeather stood still, taking in her surroundings with careful observation. For many years, she had heard stories of the white man's dwellings, but she had never imagined herself standing inside one. Montgomery removed his hat and hung it on a rack by the door. "You're safe here," he said simply. "No one will harm you on my land." Tallfeather's response was direct, her dark eyes meeting his without fear. "Why did you buy me?" The question hung between them. Unavoidable and necessary. Montgomery gestured for her to take a seat by the fire, respecting her enough not to dodge the question. "I didn't buy you," he clarified, his voice firm. "I paid to stop what was happening, but I make no claim of ownership over you. You're free to leave whenever you wish." He paused, adding, "Though I'd advise waiting until you're rested and properly equipped. It's dangerous country for anyone traveling alone." Tall Feather considered his words, searching for the lie or manipulation within them, but finding none. Finally, she nodded once and took the offered seat. Mrs. Holbrook returned with a tray of food and hot coffee, her professional manner firmly in place, despite the occasional curious glance at their unusual guest. As Tall Feather ate, Montgomery explained that his ranch employed people from various backgrounds: Mexican vaqueros, freed slaves, even a Chinese cook. "Skill and character matter more to me than where a person comes from," he said. "There's a place here for anyone willing to work honestly." He paused, watching as she wrapped her long fingers around the coffee cup, seeking its warmth. "Including you, if you choose to stay." Tall Feather said nothing, but the slight relaxation of her shoulders suggested his words had at least been heard. The following days established a cautious routine. Mrs. Holbrook, with remarkable ingenuity, altered some of Montgomery's clothes to fit Tall Feather until proper women's clothing could be made to her measurements. The ranch hands, initially startled by her presence, quickly learned to mind their manners under Montgomery's watchful eye. Tall Feather spent her time observing the workings of the ranch, occasionally assisting with tasks that required her considerable strength, but always maintaining a certain distance. She slept in the guest room with the window open, regardless of the weather, and Montgomery suspected she contemplated leaving each night, but chose to stay for reasons of her own. A week after her arrival, as autumn winds stripped golden leaves from the cottonwoods along the creek, Montgomery found Tall Feather in the horse corral. She stood in the center, motionless, as his prized stallion, a temperamental beast that allowed few to approach him, circled her curiously. "He doesn't usually take to strangers," Montgomery remarked, leaning against the fence. Tall Feather didn't look away from the horse as she replied, "He is not afraid because I am not afraid." With slow, deliberate movements, she raised her hand, and the stallion approached to nuzzle her palm. "Animals know truth better than men," she added. "They see what is, not what they fear or wish to see." The conversation shifted something between them, opening a door to more meaningful exchanges. That evening, seated by the fire after the rest of the household had retired, Montgomery asked about her people. Instead of retreating into silence as she had before, Tall Feather spoke of the Blackfoot traditions, of her father who had been a respected warrior, and her mother who had come from another tribe. "My height comes from my grandfather," she explained. "He too stood taller than others. In my tribe, it was seen as a blessing from the spirits." Her voice carried no self-consciousness about her stature, only a matter-of-fact acceptance. "It was only among your people that I became a monster." Montgomery's face darkened at her words. "Ignorance makes monsters of what men don't understand," he said. Then, surprising them both, he shared his own story. Born to wealth in Boston, educated at Harvard, he had come west after the death of his first wife and young son to smallpox. "I built this ranch from nothing," he explained. "Hired men others wouldn't give a chance to, because I know what it is to be judged for things beyond your control." He fell silent, staring into the flames. Tall Feather studied his profile, seeing for the first time the sorrow etched into the lines around his eyes. "Your heart carries many burdens," she observed quietly. Montgomery looked up, meeting her gaze. "As does yours," he replied. As autumn deepened toward winter, Tall Feather's presence at the Double M became a subject of intense speculation in Sweetwater Creek. Rumors spread about the giant Indian woman living at Montgomery's ranch, each story more outlandish than the last. Some claimed she was being kept as a curiosity, others that Montgomery had lost his mind in his loneliness. The gossip reached its peak when Montgomery brought Tall Feather to town one crisp November morning. She rode beside him on a horse specially chosen to accommodate her height, dressed in a custom-made riding habit that Mrs. Holbrook had created. Together they made a striking pair, Montgomery with his silver-streaked hair and commanding presence, Tall Feather with her impressive height and regal bearing. The townsfolk stared openly as they made their way down the main street to the general store. Inside, the proprietor, Mr. Wilson, nearly dropped the ledger he was holding. Good morning, Mr. Montgomery," he stammered, his eyes darting nervously to Tall Feather. Montgomery greeted him cordially, introducing Tall Feather as his guest and proceeding to order supplies for the ranch. Throughout the exchange, he treated her with the same respect he would show any lady, ignoring the whispers and stares from other customers. When a group of men near the door made a crude remark, Montgomery turned slowly, his hand moving instinctively toward his gun. The men fell silent, backing away from his cold gaze. After completing their business, they stopped at the town's small restaurant for lunch. The proprietress, a widow named Mrs. Chen, who had come west after the railroad work that had employed her late husband ended, showed none of the prejudice of the other townsfolk. She welcomed them warmly, seating them at her best table and serving a meal that combined American and Chinese cooking. "You ignore the stares," Tall Feather observed as they ate. Montgomery shrugged. "They'll find something new to gossip about soon enough." His casual dismissal of public opinion impressed her, though she knew the cost of such defiance better than most. "Your reputation suffers because of me," she said. Montgomery's laugh was genuine, surprising her. "My reputation has weathered worse storms," he assured her. As they left the restaurant, Sheriff Blackwood approached them on the boardwalk. "Gabriel," he nodded, then tipped his hat to Tall Feather with unexpected courtesy. "Ma'am." The gesture, so ordinary yet so rarely extended to her, caught Tall Feather off guard. She inclined her head in acknowledgement as the men exchanged news about local matters. Before they parted, Blackwood lowered his voice. "Watch yourself, Gabriel. Jensen and his boys were in the saloon last night, running their mouths about the Indian lover at Double M. Might be nothing." But Montgomery thanked him for the warning, his expression hardening at the mention of Frank Jensen, a rival rancher known for his violent temperament and dishonest dealings. The ride back to the ranch was tense, both aware that they were potentially being watched. "This Jensen," Tall Feather said as they crossed the boundary onto Montgomery's land. "He is your enemy?" Montgomery considered the question. "He's a man who takes what he wants and doesn't care who gets hurt in the process. He's been trying to buy portions of my land for years, land that controls access to water in the dry season." He glanced at her. "He's dangerous, but not just to me. He led the raids against several native camps last year." Tall Feather's expression didn't change, but her hands tightened on the reins. "Including mine," she said quietly. Montgomery nodded, having suspected as much. That evening, as the first snow of the season began to fall, Tall Feather found Montgomery in his study, reviewing accounts by lamplight. She stood in the doorway, her silhouette powerful against the warm glow of the hallway lamps. "My people will be moving to their winter grounds soon," she said. "I should go to them." Montgomery set down his pen, feeling a heaviness settle in his chest at her words. "Of course," he said, keeping his voice neutral. "I'll provide you with supplies, a good horse, whatever you need for the journey." He hesitated, then added, "You'll always have a place here, should you choose to return." Tall Feather studied him with those perceptive dark eyes that seemed to see through all pretense. "Why would you offer this to me? We are strangers to each other." Montgomery stood, moving to the window where snow drifted past in the darkness. "Are we?" he asked quietly. "I've told you things I've never spoken of to anyone. You know more about me than people I've known for years." He turned to face her. "And I think I know you, Tall Feather, even in the silences between your words." The tension between them shifted, becoming something else entirely, something neither had anticipated when they first met in that auction house. Tall Feather moved into the room, her steps deliberate until she stood before him. Even in the dim light, the intelligence and strength in her face were unmistakable. "I have known few white men who see people instead of savages when they look upon my kind. And I have known few people of any kind with your courage and dignity," Montgomery replied. The conversation might have continued, but a sudden commotion outside interrupted them. Shouts from the bunkhouse, the sound of running feet. Montgomery reached for the rifle mounted above the fireplace just as one of the ranch hands burst through the front door. "Mr. Montgomery! Riders coming in fast! Looks like Jensen and his men!" The young cowboy's face was flushed with alarm. "They've set fire to the north pasture fence line." Montgomery's expression hardened as he checked the rifle's loading. "Get the men armed and ready," he ordered, "and make sure Mrs. Holbrook is safe in the cellar." The attack came swiftly, a dozen riders emerging from the snowy darkness, torches in hand, firearms at the ready. They surrounded the main house, their faces obscured by scarves against the cold. Montgomery positioned his men strategically around the property, determined to defend his home, but hoping to avoid bloodshed if possible. From the porch, he called out to the leader of the group. "You're trespassing on private property, Jensen. Turn around now and we can all forget this happened." A harsh laugh answered him, followed by Frank Jensen's distinctive drawl. "I don't think so, Montgomery. I'm tired of waiting for you to see reason about that water access. And I hear you've taken to keeping Indian pets. Thought I'd see this curiosity for myself." Montgomery's finger tensed on the trigger. "Last warning, Jensen. Leave now." The standoff might have erupted into violence then and there, but a sudden movement at Montgomery's side drew everyone's attention. Tall Feather stepped onto the porch, her height and presence commanding even in the dim light. She carried a bow, one that had been mounted as a decoration in Montgomery's study, with an arrow nocked and ready. With fluid grace that spoke of a lifetime of practice, she drew the bowstring back to her cheek. The arrow flew through the snowy air with deadly accuracy, striking the ground directly between the hooves of Jensen's horse. The startled animal reared, nearly unseating its rider. "The next one won't miss," she called out, her voice carrying clearly through the winter night. The sight of her, tall, powerful, and utterly unafraid, caused several of Jensen's men to back their horses away nervously. Jensen himself struggled to control his mount, his face contorted with rage and embarrassment. "This isn't over, Montgomery," he shouted as he finally turned his horse. "You can't hide behind your savage forever." The riders retreated into the darkness, their torches disappearing like malevolent fireflies in the snowy night. Montgomery lowered his rifle, turning to Tall Feather with newfound respect. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked. She lowered the bow, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I told you my father was a warrior." The attack changed things between them, as they worked side by side to repair the damaged fences and increase security around the ranch. A partnership formed that transcended their different backgrounds. Montgomery found himself sharing more of the ranch's management with her, valuing her practical intelligence and different perspective. Tall Feather, for her part, began to teach some of the ranch hands tracking skills and weather prediction methods she had learned from her people. The other workers, initially wary, came to respect her abilities and quiet strength. By the time the winter solstice approached, bringing the longest night of the year, Tall Feather had not spoken again of leaving. On Christmas Eve, Montgomery hosted a small gathering for the ranch employees, a tradition he had maintained for years. The main house was decorated with pine boughs and candles, and Mrs. Holbrook outdid herself preparing a feast that combined traditional American holiday foods with dishes from the various cultural backgrounds of the ranch hands. Tall Feather, dressed in a deep blue gown that Mrs. Holbrook had created especially for the occasion, moved through the celebration with a quiet dignity that drew admiring glances even from those who had once viewed her with suspicion. Throughout the evening, Montgomery found his gaze returning to her. The way firelight played across her strong features, how her rare smile transformed her face. After the festivities wound down and the workers returned to the bunkhouse, Montgomery and Tall Feather remained by the fire in the main room. He poured 2 glasses of fine whiskey, offering one to her. "To surviving the longest night," he toasted, a reference both to the solstice and to the challenges they had faced together. Tall Feather accepted the glass, studying the amber liquid before taking a cautious sip. "My people also celebrate when the sun begins its return," she said, though with lesser, she gestured at the remnants of the feast, abundance. Montgomery chuckled, settling into his chair across from her. The comfortable silence between them spoke of a connection that had deepened day by day. "I have something for you," Montgomery said finally, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small wooden box, its surface polished and carved with a simple geometric pattern. "It's a custom among my people to exchange gifts at this time of year." Tall Feather accepted the box with a curious expression, opening it carefully. Inside lay a silver ring set with a single turquoise stone. Her eyes widened in surprise as she looked up at Montgomery, who had risen from his chair to stand before her. "In my culture," he explained, his voice suddenly uncertain, "this would be offered as a token of respect, admiration, and hope for a shared future." Tall Feather held the ring between her fingers, examining it in the firelight. "And if I were to accept this token," she asked carefully, "what would it mean for us?" Montgomery took a deep breath, choosing his words with deliberate care. "It would mean that I ask you to stay, not as my guest or my employee, but as my partner in all things." He paused, then added with gentle humor, "It would also scandalize every gossip from here to Denver. which I must admit holds a certain appeal. This drew a rare laugh from Tall Feather, the sound warming the room more than any fire could. "Your people would never accept such a union," she said, though she made no move to return the ring. "Some wouldn't," Montgomery acknowledged honestly. "Others might surprise you. Sheriff Blackwood mentioned just last week that you've brought a welcome change to me." He reached out slowly, taking her free hand in his. "I've spent too many years letting the opinions of others dictate the boundaries of my life. I won't do it anymore." The conviction in his voice matched the steadiness of his gaze. "I'm asking if you feel as I do, that what has grown between us is something worth fighting for, regardless of what anyone else might think." Tall Feather closed her fingers around the ring, her expression softening in a way he had never seen before. "Among my people," she said quietly, "a woman chooses her husband based on his courage, his wisdom, and his respect for her strength." The first light of Christmas morning found them still by the fire, talking of the future, the challenges they would face, the life they might build together. When Mrs. Holbrook arrived to prepare breakfast, she found Montgomery asleep in his chair, Tall Feather's hand in his, the turquoise ring gleaming on her finger. The housekeeper smiled to herself as she quietly backed out of the room. By noon, the news had spread throughout the ranch, met with reactions ranging from genuine congratulations to shocked disbelief. Montgomery received it all with the same calm assurance, while Tall Feather observed the human drama with her characteristic dignified reserve. News of their engagement reached Sweetwater Creek by evening, spreading through the town like wildfire. The reaction was predictably mixed, some expressing outrage at what they considered an unnatural union, others defending Montgomery's right to marry whom he chose. The most vocal opponent was, unsurprisingly, Frank Jensen, who loudly proclaimed in the saloon that Montgomery had finally lost his mind completely. "No real white man would take an Indian as his wife," he declared to anyone who would listen, "especially not one who looks like she could break him in half." His crude remarks drew laughter from some quarters, but stony silence from others, including Sheriff Blackwood, who made a point of announcing that he would personally be attending the wedding. The ceremony took place on New Year's Day, a symbolic fresh beginning. Judge Parker, an old friend of Montgomery's from his Boston days who had also sought his fortune in the West, agreed to perform the ceremony. The main house at Double M Ranch was decorated with pine branches and winter berries, and a curious blend of traditions was observed. Montgomery wore a formal suit ordered from Denver, while Tall Feather chose a dress of white buckskin adorned with intricate beadwork that she had created herself, incorporating symbols from her tribe's marriage rituals. The small gathering included the ranch employees, Sheriff Blackwood, Mrs. Chen from the restaurant, and a few other townsfolk brave enough to defy convention. As Judge Parker pronounced them husband and wife, Montgomery slipped the turquoise ring onto Tall Feather's finger. "With this ring," he said loud enough for all to hear, "I pledge my respect for your strength, my admiration for your courage, and my love for your spirit." Then, breaking with tradition, Tall Feather placed a ring of her own making onto Montgomery's finger, a band of silver with etchings that mimicked the patterns of eagle feathers. "With this," she responded, her voice clear and confident, "I accept you as my partner on the path the Creator has set before us, through all seasons to come." Their kiss sealed the union, witnessed by a community that would never be quite the same again. The years that followed brought both challenges and unexpected joys. The marriage of Gabriel Montgomery and Tall Feather, who eventually took the name Eleanor Montgomery for legal purposes, while retaining her tribal name among her people, became something of a legend in the territory. Their unique partnership brought innovations to ranching practices, combining traditional Western methods with the sustainable land management Tall Feather had learned from her tribe. The Double M prospered, expanding its operations and influence. Frank Jensen's attempts to undermine them ultimately failed, his increasingly desperate tactics eventually leading to his arrest and imprisonment after an attempted cattle rustling operation went wrong. Perhaps the greatest surprise came 2 years after their marriage, when Eleanor gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, both healthy and strong. The children grew up between two worlds, learning both their father's business acumen and their mother's deep connection to the land and its rhythms. They faced prejudice, certainly, but also found acceptance among those who judged people by their character rather than their bloodlines. Gabriel and Eleanor raised them to stand tall, both literally and figuratively, against whatever challenges life might present. And when visitors to the Double M expressed surprise at the striking woman who helped run the ranch, Gabriel would smile and say, "They called her a monster once, until I recognized her for what she truly was, the strongest, most remarkable person I've ever known." As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, the Montgomery family stood as living proof that the frontier, for all its harshness, could also be a place where new beginnings were possible, where love could transcend boundaries, and where a person's true measure lay not in conforming to others' expectations, but in the courage to forge one's own path. Helena, who had once been displayed as a curiosity in an auction house, became a respected figure in the region, consulted by other ranchers for her wisdom and sought out by members of various tribes as a bridge between cultures. Gabriel, now in his 70s with fully silver hair but still straight-backed and clear-eyed, would often be found sitting beside her on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, his hand resting contentedly in hers. On the 50th anniversary of the day, Gabriel placed the turquoise ring on Eleanor's finger. Their grandchildren gathered at the Double M to celebrate not just a marriage, but a legacy. The family now included doctors, ranchers, tribal leaders, and even a young lawyer arguing cases for native rights in Washington. As twilight settled over the land, Gabriel and Eleanor stood together on the hilltop where they had first viewed the ranch together all those years ago. "They said it wouldn't last a season," Gabriel remarked, his voice roughened by age but still carrying the same quiet authority. Eleanor, still tall and proud despite the years, smiled as she looked out over the domain they had built together. "They were wrong about many things," she replied simply, her fingers intertwined with his as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.